Hello everyone. Impero is an oddball. That's apparent to anyone who's read her voice lines, but it goes further beyond that to her hull type as well. Despite being a part of the Littorio class, she's been implemented as an aircraft carrier, instead of what she was scrapped as, that being a battleship. But there is actually a reason for the devs to do that, as the Ansaldo shipbuilding company put a great deal of effort into conversion plans for her during the war. By 1941 it had become abundantly apparent to the rest of Italian Supreme Command that the aircraft carriers the Regia Marina had been trying to procure for years now were in fact necessary, and that the cover from ground-based aircraft just wasn't going to cut it anymore. This, as we know, led to the conversion projects that were to become Aquila and Spavero. But there was another. Archival drawings related to Impero in regards to naval aviation potentially date back to 1940, like this particular one here featuring her already existing aircraft facilities placed on her bow. The potential idea being to make her a hybrid of sorts, perhaps by removing the front turret to make space for seaplanes. Of particular note here, and on all of the designs to follow, is a prominent bulbous bow. I know what you might be thinking, it's a large ship, of course it has a bulbous bow. But they actually weren't all that common around this time, especially in warships. A few did have them, but they hadn't reached widespread adoption. A second drawing, not far removed from the one I just showed you, but with no known date, shows the first leap towards a proper conversion. Featuring a flight deck with 27-metre catapult and 14 by 15-metre elevator to the hangar below. By 1941, these studies had evolved into a full-deck battleship, and even some Japanese deck concepts. The first of these drawings only really shows a revision to the catapult and crane location, but the second gives us a better view of the full flight deck. One of the most notable features is the second catapult, longer than the other at 36.5 metres, and asymmetrically placed further starboard. However, the crane is not asymmetrical to its counterpart. In fact, it lacks sufficient clearance for any traditional aircraft to take off from in that position. What it does have clearance for is jet and rocket powered weapons, something that would become a bit of a recurring theme later on with Impero. There's also a smaller 5x4 metre elevator, most likely for weapons handling. A second series of drawings existed at the time with a flight deck that stopped short of the bow. These are the Japanese decks I was talking about, but these clearly were not favoured, as they didn't appear in future designs, and the book I'm sourcing from didn't even recreate them. We also start to see the new 120mm dual-purpose guns meant to equip her and other Regia Marina ships here. 1942 starts with a small but significant change. The Italian word for study disappears from the drawings, indicating a serious consideration for going ahead with these plans, or at least a more advanced stage of design. We get the first drawing of the full flight deck, measuring 240 metres long and about 42.7 wide. The island of 28 by 10 metres is cantilevered to starboard, as is convention, surrounded by 6 dual-purpose guns, and 2 types of smaller twin AA guns. The cranes, previously ever present, are now absent, and the catapult has been lengthened to 48 and 32 metres respectively, for operations of heavier aircraft that are being trialled for Aquila. 4 elevators are present, 2 16x14 main ones for aircraft, and a pair of smaller ones for ordnance, with one being a larger 9x9 metres. A second design re-evaluates the weight distribution, bringing the island forward and removing 2 of the dual-purpose guns, and featuring a pair of large twin turrets, probably for new 65mm guns if I had to guess. The overhang sections are extended, coming up to the catapults, shortened to 28 and 23 metres, and the cranes make a return, joined by some arresting gear. The elevators have been reworked. The aft weapon elevator is gone, and the forward one resized to 5x5 metres. The forward elevator is a slightly rectangular 15x14 metres, while the aft is a 14.5 square. This one also features a drawing of her rudder, redesigned to make better use of her improved hydrodynamics from the bulbous bow. This is where things start to get weird. I'm pretty sure this woman thinks being normal is beneath her, as the next 1942 design has some unorthodox changes. Starting with the most obvious, the jet blast deflector on the port side of the bow. Also, the cranes are gone again, and they're going to stay that way. Anyway, the deflector is there for the launch ramp intended for unconventional weapons. By this point, the Italians had gotten their hands on the Gunnarsson document, a set of Dutch intelligence reports about a malfunctioning V1 type weapon that fell on the island of Bornholm. The ramp for deployment of such weapons. In fact, on the drawings, these weapons are labelled as Phi 103s, which is the Luftwaffe designation for the V1, even if the weapons on the drawings themselves bear little resemblance to the actual product. There was also the DAC, an acronym for something in Italian that was meant as an anti-air weapon, but Han Solo was more interested in it for anti-ship purposes. The addition of these systems also influenced the flight deck design, with the port side of the deck being extended, widening up to a maximum of 50 metres. This was to facilitate the preparation of such weapons, and as such a third main elevator of 15 by 12 metres, that's space for 3 weapons, was to be installed, in addition to a smaller 8 by 7 unit for ferrying fuels and other related equipment. The ramp would have needed a stabilisation system in order to properly launch these horizontally unstable, legally distinct V1s, while also rolling on the seas. This complex requirement was not helped by the low military value of it as an unbarked weapon that takes up hangar space and is complex to prepare and slow to utilise. Remember, these are basically unmanned kamikaze planes, not actual missiles. Han Solo considered abandoning the 103 while slowly considering research on the DAC. Clearly they didn't get very far. Come 1943 we got the final designs. These had a great deal more detail than previous year's drawings, but at least the final one was once again classified as studies, likely due to the increasingly unfavourable war situation. The general shape remains the same, though the stabilised ramp has been replaced with a fixed ski jump, seemingly for mainly aeronautical use. This first interim design is the only one to give us her bow and stern view, though as you're about to see, the final design varies wildly in comparison. That final design is this, formally completed in the time between the fall of the fascist regime and the armistice. What probably jumps out to you the most is that it's been mirrored. The reshaped island has been pulled back and moved to the port, as opposed to its original more normal position, and the deck extension has been moved to starboard in its place. That extra space retains its original purpose, being a loading area, but now it's for regular aircraft instead of unmanned kamikaze planes, and has lost its main elevator in the process. This is made up for by the 4 elevator, which has been expanded to carry up 2 fighters at a time or accommodate larger aircraft. Dual-purpose guns are back to 6 mount, and smaller caliber AA is labelled as the 37mm collapsible mounts from the Littorio class, at least for the starboard side, though the drawing's nomenclature doesn't list them. Aviation facilities include at least 1 bow catapult, with a potential second one integrated into the ski jump, though it may be some sort of guide instead. The artist's recreations don't show any arresting gear, but I assume it'd be there. It'd be kind of problematic if it wasn't. The hangar is estimated to be around 173 metres long with a height of around 6.5, allowing them to store extra airframes on the same deal as Aquila had she made it to service. This puts her air group at an estimated 45 on the hangar floor and an extra 25 above, toasting a very solid 70 machines of the Re-2001 OR. Note that this doesn't take into account folding wing aircraft. If the 2001 could, you'd probably squeeze a few more in there. Part of the flight deck was reportedly armoured, though to what extent is unknown, and the overhang areas had aluminium walls as programmed failure points to vent gases or collisions in the event of an explosion. Machinery remains unchanged from her battleship form, as most of it had already been installed, though her propellers were to be swapped for new 4-bladed screws to better work with her new hydrodynamics. these have been left out of the drawings, which show no props whatsoever. Her armoured belt would have been thinned, likely by removing the thinner decapping plate, and its support reducing it to around 220mm. This is still very good by carrier standards though. As we all know, this was never meant to be. Work had been suspended on Impero during the war, and it's unclear if any executive plans were drawn regarding her conversion. The final design is only called that because it was the last one made before Armistice. It was not necessarily a finished product. If it was, Italy's ability to carry out the project was questionable at best. Between material shortages, manpower issues, and losing a war, it all conspired to make such a conversion borderline impossible. But if you'll allow me, I'd like to speculate a bit on what she could have turned out like. Assuming Italy doesn't bow out of the war and work starts immediately based on the most recent design, I think she could be done by late 1945. Her AA suite would likely be overhauled during construction. The 120s would have been replaced by the new AA mounts for the existing 135s. From what I heard, they were having trouble with the development for the dual-purpose gun, and these were already around and planned for Italy's other carrier conversions. Currently, the AA is pretty heavily concentrated on one side of the ship, so I could see additional platforms on the starboard side, or both to better balance or add more AA guns. For those guns, I'd expect the 37mm to be replaced by the under development 65mm, also like the other carriers, and for lots of 20mm, whether that's the existing mount, or if they can get the sextuple mount into service. Once again, like the other carriers. Air wing I could see getting revised too. The Re 2000 OR would be pretty outdated by this point, so I could see the more capable Re 2005 taking its place, as the primary fighter with light bombing and torpedo attack capabilities. Likely upgraded further with the company's own Ray 103 W18 engines as opposed to the licence-built Daimler-Benz V12s. Maybe they'd want a proper carrier attack aircraft though, too. What that would be, I'm not sure. I don't know much about Italian aircraft of this era. For all I know, they could have been slapping a pair of Alfa Romeo 1101s into an Aeronautica Umbra MB902 and using it as a heavy fighter bomber. They probably wouldn't, but I'd be down for it. So, after all that yapping, which version is the Impero we have in-game based on? Fortunately, despite how little rigging she has, it does give us some pretty good hints. She does have a few single turret guns by her legs, so that immediately rules out the model in the Venice Navy Museum, that has her old triple 152s in their place, likely representing a quick and dirty emergency conversion. Her flight deck is also normally shaped instead of weird like the late 1942 and 43 designs, meaning she has to be based on a 1941 or early 42 design. Given only 4 of her guns are present, I'm inclined to believe it's the one from 42 with a reduced number of 120mm turrets. It does open up the doors for her getting a retrofit or Type 2 based on her final 43 configuration though. So that's Impero's stillborn history with naval aviation. An attempt for the Regia Marina to get naval aviation without it being an emergency rush job like Aquila or Spovero. She's likely only this way in game so that the Italians have actual options for carriers instead of just Aquila, but I appreciate them using this obscure bit of history to do it. Naturally, there's a lot of things I didn't cover in any particular depth, like the jet weapons or previous carrier attempts. And if you'd like to read into that yourself, I recommend the book Aircraft Carrier Impero, the Axis Powers V1 Carrying Capital Ship, which I used as the main source for this video. I'll leave an Amazon link in the description. Unless I forget, in which case bully me until I do. But that's all I've got for today, so until next time, fair winds and following seas.